Let's start this economic session by imagining that we are stepping into a time machine. In this MBA bootcamp time machine, we will be transported far back in time to the year 2007, and we will land in Cupertino, California at the Apple computer headquarters. If you want to visit San Francisco from there, Cupertino is only 38 miles or something like 60 kilometers south of the amazing city of San Francisco. So now we're in 2007 and at Apple, and in the company they're just about to launch the first iPhone. Now when you step outside of the time machine in Cupertino, you will in fact become one of the managers responsible for the iPhone launch. And by the way, that product launch was one of the most promoted consumer products of its time. Now, as a business manager working for Apple and responsible for the iPhone launch, one of the most important things you will need to do is to decide on the price of that first iPhone. How would you decide on that price? Well, you could take the standard economic and rational approach to setting the price of the first iPhone, and that process might look something like this. First, you ask focus groups about various price points for the iPhone, and based on those findings, you pick the price management think could maximize profits. Let's say that the number you come up with was $400. Okay, now you've made your decision, but now you might like to have some additional information about what was occurring just around that time in the economy. Well, on October 23rd of that same year, Alan Greenspan, who was then the chairman of the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States and considered to be the greatest banker who ever lived, confessed that he was shocked. Greenspan confessed that he was shocked because the financial markets had not operated as he had expected. So on that day, Greenspan publicly said for the very first time that he had made a mistake in assuming that banks and other financial institutions were capable of protecting shareholders. And Greenspan even confessed that his belief in the rationality of markets, organizations, and people had fallen apart. What Greenspan was really saying was that markets were not always capable of making rational decisions and not always healthy, self-regulating institutions. Now, this statement may not sound very important, but in fact, that statement was totally opposite to the conventional economic thinking of the time, and that conventional thinking had been based on the principle of the invisible hand. In fact, what Greenspan was admitting was that the invisible hand might be irrational. Okay, this might already sound like econo-speak to you, and especially for those of you who are not very familiar with economics, but Greenspan's statement was condemning one of the most important principles of economics when he said what he said, and that principle was the invisible hand. And the invisible hand was a term first used by Adam Smith back in the late 1700s, 1759 to be exact. And Smith's principle of the invisible hand stated that individuals or firms' efforts to pursue their own interest may frequently benefit society more than if their actions were directly intended to benefit society. In other words, what Smith was saying is that markets automatically channel self-interest towards socially desirable ends. But the financial earthquake of 2008 and Chairman Greenspan's statement that markets were not always capable of making rational decisions and not always healthy, self-regulating institutions actually brought into question accepted economic thinking and the validity of classical economics. And this is very important for you to understand for the purpose of the boot camp session, because the principle of the invisible hand is probably the single most important proposition ever made in economic theory. But today, more than ever, economists are beginning to question if in fact competitive markets truly do a good job at allocating resources, and if they do not, how can we achieve that balance? Okay, now let's fast forward to the present time and what we see emerging as an outright questioning of economics as it was taught in business schools for the past 100 years or more. In other words, even business school economists are questioning if human beings and markets are in fact rational. And if they're not, how does irrationality drive human decision-making? And even more importantly, if human decision-making is irrational, how should business managers like you and I run our businesses? And this is the subject we will go deeper into in the next video.